It walks like a JRPG, talks like a Western RPG, and thinks like neither. Clair Obscur Expedition 33 doesn't just blur the lines, it erases the map. It takes something special to succeed in the turn-based RPG genre today. It's a genre that's well beyond its golden years, and feels like the formula was already perfected before the turn of the millennium. That's not to say the genre hasn't been improved upon. Obviously, games like the Persona series have kept turn-based RPGs thriving in the modern era, and Baldur's Gate 3 launched its popularity to new heights, though it is a CRPG, which is a subgenre. But Clair Obscur is the biggest leap forward for traditional turn-based RPGs in over a decade, because it incorporates elements from both Western and Japanese RPGs. From a narrative standpoint, the biggest difference between the two RPG subgenres is branching narrative. Western RPGs are completely built on player choice and allowing them to guide the narrative and shape the world based on their decisions. To the point that after a quick brainstorming session, the only major Western RPG franchise I could think of without this feature is the Diablo series. Meanwhile, JRPGs might even be overconfident in their ability to tell a linear narrative, as exhaustive cutscenes are one of my personal gripes with them. Clair Obscur's storytelling fits firmly into the latter category of an entirely linear story, barring one instance, and shows great confidence in its ability to tell a philosophical and captivating narrative. However, the dialogue and tone of the story is geared firmly towards a Western audience. See, JRPG characters tend to fit cleanly into certain archetypes, the brooding swordsman, the cheery mage girl, or the loyal childhood friend, while Western characters tend to be more fluid and nuanced, not neatly fitting into any archetype. The characters of Clair Obscur are deeply complex and morally conflicted, each with unique interpretations of their own mortality brought about by the Gommage. Mael in particular is one of the most layered and psychologically intricate characters I've come across in an RPG in an extremely long time. I know that telling a linear story might not exactly seem like a compelling case for it being a JRPG structured story, but there are particular story beats in Clair Obscur that perfectly mirror common JRPG tropes, but for the sake of spoilers, I'll let you draw your own parallels. But where Clair Obscur is an extremely obvious synthesis of both East and West is in the combat and customization. Turn-based RPGs are an Eastern-dominated genre. They simply do not exist in a traditional sense in Western game development. You can point to examples like Undertale, Sea of Stars, and Citizen Sleeper, but all of these games subvert turn-based combat in some way. Actually, tell a lie, I suppose the South Park games count as a AAA traditional turn-based RPG. But if your game has a boss fight against an aborted Nazi zombie fetus, you are officially disqualified from calling yourself traditional. So it's natural that almost all of Clair Obscur's combat inspiration comes from legendary JRPGs like Final Fantasy and Paper Mario. However, it has an extremely heavy influence from Souls-likes and Sekiro games, which demand perfect precision. This gives Clair Obscur a heavy emphasis on action and quick reflexes, which are strongly rooted in Western-style games. I'm going to stop you right there. I don't have time to explain why Dark Souls isn't a JRPG if you don't already understand that it isn't, but to draw a parallel to our current subject, Dark Souls is the reflection of Clair Obscur as a Western game made by a Japanese studio, where Clair Obscur is a Japanese game made by a Western studio, and that's why both of these games are so wildly acclaimed, because they're a fusion of two cultures, who took the basis for the other's work and examined it through the design sensibilities of their own values. In doing so, they discovered design flaws and pitfalls that had become rooted in their respective genres, and crafted an experience that defied those staples and made something new. This is why outsider art is so important, because new perspectives are required for video game genres to evolve. Think about what your reaction would have been to hearing about Metroid Prime if you were a Super Metroid fan, or comment what it was if you do remember. But either way, if Metroid Prime was announced today, I think it's safe to say that the community would have flipped out. But the reason Metroid Prime exists is because it was given to a developer from a different culture, and they grafted their own culture onto a pre-existing one and created an utterly unique masterpiece, just as Dark Souls and Clair Obscur did decades later. So don't be concerned when a game is being made by people different from who originally made it, because while it's definitely going to be different, There's no guarantee it's going to be bad, and the mixture of two creative mindsets can blend into a perfect synthesis of both teams to create a masterpiece. For more Clair Obscur essays, here's one about how the game tackles isolation in comparison to Death Stranding, and I'll be back in 2 days.